Answer your question a little bit. Again, Hebrews talks about not being afraid of Pharaoh, if I remember correctly, whereas the text here, Moses is afraid of it being known, which is, I think, a significant difference between the two. Because we don't see that Pharaoh seeks to kill him until after Moses is afraid that it's going to be known, rather than he being afraid of Pharaoh taking his life. Because if he was afraid of Pharaoh taking his life, he wouldn't have come back in the manner in which he did. But he worked on faith, knowing that if he did come back, which he does, that the Lord was going to take care of him, protect and preserve him over and against the threats of Pharaoh. So Hebrews talks about his lack of fear in the face of death, but here he's afraid of the word getting out, which I think is a little bit of a difference in terms of how the situation unfolds going forward. The other thing that I do want to point out, as we'll see here, in the movie, have we already seen a glimpse of Pharaoh's wife?
No.
Yeah, we have. In the movie, she is previously captured and presented to Moses as a gift for, I think it was his birthday, something to that. I think it was his birthday. And then she escapes, and he sees her escape, and he lets her go. And you know, in movie writing, we'll see why this is important, because it sets up the plot. But the reality is, we don't see Moses' wife appear in the text until after he's already fled to Midian. So, not important in the grand scheme of things from a theological perspective, but it shows some of the liberties that they took with the biblical text in order to have a coherent plot from a cinematic standpoint to move forward. Because one of the things that you want to avoid when writing a movie is something that is known as a deus ex machina, which is the hand of God. And so by having Zipporah make an appearance earlier in the movie, what happens as we get to Moses in the desert works more from a cinematic and script writing standpoint. But the biblical text actually doesn't mention her until now, not where we see her first enter into the movie.
So he had an Egyptian wife and a, what was her name?
No, it never says he had an Egyptian wife. Joseph had an Egyptian wife.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do want to point out as differences between Joseph and Moses as well, is Joseph fully leaned into, if you remember correctly, his Egyptian heritage. He took an Egyptian wife, he named his children in such a way that, in a sense, renounced his heritage from his father and his brothers. And it wasn't until after his death that he actually leaves Egypt and has a desire to rejoin his family and rejoin, in a sense, the faith that he was brought up in. Whereas Moses, as we see, well, actually, let's just go ahead and read it since you brought it up. I think this is a good chance to bring up that point here. So let's look at 16. Now the priest, we're in Exodus 2, by the way, in case you're wondering where we're at. So Exodus chapter 2. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew the water and filled the troughs with water to water their father's flock. The shepherds stood and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. The Freudian slip anticipating larger women later on. When they come to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock." And he said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Where have you left the man? Call him that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." So Moses here, in 22 especially, the way he names his daughter, recognizes he has not now and in the past been where he needs to be, which is with his people. He knows his whole life he has been a sojourner. He has been a stranger in a place that is not fully his own, that is not his own home. And so he names his son in such a way that anticipates and recognizes that, and ultimately is looking forward to the larger work that God is going to have Moses do, which is lead the people of Israel to their own land, the promised land.
So you don't think it's referring to his sojourn in Midian, but his sojourn in Egypt?
I think it's both, because the Midianites were still not a part of the 12 tribes of Israel that he was known, but they were, again, a Semitic people that were related from both a cultural and linguistic standpoint to the people of Israel. So it works on both fronts, both in terms of his sojourn in the courts of Pharaoh, but also his sojourn in the time of Midian leading up to Exodus 3, which is his interaction with the burning bush. So it's a both and. It's a recognition of the larger pattern of his life in which he has been a stranger everywhere he's gone, and he won't find his true home and his true place until he encounters Yahweh, the Lord, in Exodus chapter 3, and until he works to bring the people out of Egypt and into the promised land. So as we see the story unfold, we'll see why he has this strong sense of being a sojourner. And then the other thing we do want to point out in terms of the name Gershom is that it's a combination of stranger in that place and there. And again, it's there both in Midian but also back in Egypt. Because earlier in the text in Exodus 2, it's very clear that Moses saw the Egyptian taskmaster mistreating his people. It's not those people or the Hebrews, it's his people that they were mistreating. And again, if he was truly fully Egyptian and integrated into the court of Pharaoh, there would be no reason for Pharaoh to react in the way that he did to seek Moses' life. And again, who is the one who actually raises Moses while he's in the court of Pharaoh? His mother. So, whereas the movie, for dramatic purposes, has Moses be completely unaware of his heritage, be completely unaware of who he is, and accidentally kills the person and runs off even as his brother Ramses is trying to convince him to stay, Moses knew exactly what he was doing when he stopped and killed that taskmaster. Moses knows exactly that he is not exactly where and who he is meant to be with until he is called into the prophetic office by God in Exodus 3 and begins this journey first to Pharaoh and then out of Egypt and then to the promised land with wanderings in the wilderness in between.
So you think that she continued to raise him even after she was done nursing him?
Yeah, I would say in the text, it says until he had grown up. And so I would say it's probably his late teens. It's around that time in which I think, well, as
But it
early
makes
as
it sound like
13,
he
if I...
wasn't named until after she brought him back to the daughter. Because in 10 it says, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses.
Yeah,
Do you
so...
think he wasn't named until he was in his teens?
No, I think when we see this in the text here, it's this introduction of who he is. So, we have Moses', yeah, so his mom is essentially like a wet nurse for Moses. And as he is brought up in the household, well, and when we see grew up in 10 here, and 11 and grown up, again, it doesn't give an exact age, but we know it's past nursing age.
How do we know that? I mean, they nursed him until they were about 5, so he would have had a lot of interaction with the family.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is grown up also in terms of being able to be a part of the larger life of Egypt. The earliest we see an Egyptian ruler ascend to power, I think, is actually King Tut. I think he was, if I remember, 13.
Well, my version says, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter. It doesn't say grown up.
Yeah.
So, but you think it means that he was definitely older than 5?
Older than 5. But I would say not like in his 30s. I think there is some time that is passing. And again, if we think about how, we only have 10 verses to go through Moses' childhood and adolescence. It's like, if you think about it, how many verses are actually talking about the time between Jesus is born and returns from Egypt, which is Epiphany, to when he begins his ministry at the baptism and wedding at Cana? They're like 3, 4 verses, and that's the little interlude in the Gospels when Jesus is in the temple, right? Where he disappears and his parents are freaking out, and he's like, "Why are you scared? I'm exactly where I should be, in my Father's house." And it's why at that point where every parent knows is where their child has made a good point, and they're right. They don't want to admit it, but say, "All right, let's go home." But I don't think it's totally uncommon too for names to be fully given, especially in Egyptian culture, until a little bit older. But the reality is, we have a lot of condensing of years into 10 verses.
I just don't understand why she would, if she was gonna have him as her son, she would have the Hebrew continue to raise him past being nursed.
Well, I think there's a little bit of divine intervention going on here with what's happening, both in terms of, if we see in chapter 1, in verse 17, for example, "But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live." So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said, "Why have you done this? Why have you let the male children live?" The midwife said to Pharaoh, "Because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them." So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. So I would say Pharaoh's daughter and the people in his court have seen firsthand this. They describe it as being vigorous, but I think, as we see very clearly, that God dealt well with them. So they have clearly been blessed and are doing far better than what would typically be expected. So it's not totally unsurprising that, sort of like what we see with Pilate in his interactions with the chief priests, teachers of the law, he recognizes that Jesus is special. He recognizes that he is, in a sense, from God. And so he tries to do all that he can to avoid essentially what needs to be done, and he eventually lets the people decide for him by then offering the choice between Barabbas and himself. And I would say Pharaoh and his daughters, Pharaoh's daughters and the people of their court, and the midwives, who would certainly be working not just amongst the Hebrews, but amongst the Egyptians as well, have seen, in a sense, the Lord working, have seen them, despite the command of Pharaoh, continue to grow and to become strong, that they were not going to interfere with what clearly seems to be divine intervention. Because you have to understand, this is a time in history where people, regardless of whether they are monotheistic or polytheistic, are very religious and are constantly looking for signs. And if there is something that seems to be a sign from God or from the gods, they are not going to do much to get in the way of that unless they are very stubborn and set their face, like Pharaoh will be. And then that's when the Lord is going to work and reveal his power. Stubborn like the kings of Israel, and some of the high priests will be, when they're stubborn in their refusal to worship God alone. And then finally God sends his prophets to reveal his power and his judgment, etc. So if we see the pattern of behavior in the course of Scripture, it's not altogether surprising that the midwives act in the way that they do, that Pharaoh's daughter in the court acts the way that she does. And she might also wait to name him until he's old, so that way it protects Moses as well. If he names him Moses and has this indication clearly from his name that she drew him out of the water, then those who might be enforcing Pharaoh's edict are going to step in right away. But if he's already grown up, that time for Moses' death has already passed as well. So I think it's twofold, potentially in terms of preserving Moses, which clearly God has a plan for Moses, as we see, but also the practical reality that the midwives who are working sort of on behalf of the Egyptians are not doing their job, almost, I don't know the best word, weaponized incompetence. I'm sorry, we couldn't quite get to the Hebrew women in time. They're giving birth too soon, but the text is, they're letting this happen because they see the hand of the Lord on them, and we also see that God allows them to be enriched in their life. So he gave them families, these midwives. So I think it's a combination of a variety of things where the hand of the Lord is on the situation to preserve Moses, to allow him to get to the point where he does, where he eventually will be called by God and return to demand Pharaoh release the people of Israel. Great questions, though. The other thing I do want to just quickly point out as a little bit of an interlude, and actually, you know what, I'm going to save that for later. So forget I said I was going to point out something now. I'm going to point it out later. All right, any other questions? Great questions, though.
Hey, you! Aren't these your camels?
What are you girls doing?
We're trying to get the bloody man out of the well.
Trying to get the funny man out of the well.
That's why Papa says she'll never get married.
I have to do this. Ladies, please, I'm really quite up. No, not there. Please. Ladies, you've cleaned every inch of me. Whoa, I was wrong.
You are both welcome. You should not be a stranger in this land. You have been sent as Bessie. And tonight, she'll be my honored guest.
My father, Jethro, High Priest of Midian.
Stay with me.
All right.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry.
My children, let us give thanks for this bountiful food. And let us also give thanks for the presence of this brave young man whom we honor here tonight.
Please, I wish you would. I've done nothing in my life worth honoring.
First you rescue Zipporah from Egypt. Then you defend my younger daughters from brigands. You think that is nothing? It seems you do not know what is worthy of honor. A smooth thread in a tapestry, though its color brightly shine, can never see its purpose in the pattern of the grand design. And the stone that sits on the very top of the fountain's mighty face doesn't think it's more important than the stones that form the base. So how can you see what your life is worth, or where your value lies? You can never see through the eyes of man. You must look at your life through heaven's eyes. A lake of gold in the desert sand is less than a cool, fresh spring. And one lost sheep, a shepherd boy, is greater than the richest king. If a man lose everything he owns, has he truly lost his worth? Or is it the beginning of a new and brighter birth? So how do you measure the worth of a man in wealth or strength or size? In how much he gained or how much he gained? The answer will come. The answer will come to him who tries to look at his life through heaven's eyes. And that's what shall we have with you, though there's little to be found. When all you've got is nothing, there's a lot to go around. Oh, life can escape you blown about by the winds of change and chance. And though you never know all the steps,
Dance with me.
you must learn to join the dance. You must learn to join the dance. How do you judge what a man is worth? By what he
So a couple of points real quick, getting back to our idea of type. Again, confirmation students, which is who? Everybody, but also junior confirmation students. An important concept. We see a type of Christ in two different characters, not just in the movie, but even more so in the text at this point in the story of the Exodus. Who are those two characters? Moses. Who's the other one, though? Jethro. Why would I say Jethro? Well, what does Jethro and his family do? What does he do? He's at his heart, a shepherd. But what also do we see him be identified as in the text? He is a priest. He's somewhat of a mysterious figure, but he actually shares some parallels with another figure in the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, Melchizedek, who was the king of Salem, who also was high priest of Salem. And as we see later on, especially in the New Testament, Melchizedek is identified as being a type of Christ, in a sense who is prophet, priest, and king. And in this way also, I would say that Jethro also anticipates Christ in a certain way as being somebody who is both shepherd as well as priest. And the other folks who stand in as a type of Christ often has shepherding, like Moses and David, and many of the prophets like Amos, etc., who were shepherds prior to their call into the ministry, whatever, if it's the prophetic ministry, whether it's the priesthood, etc. You have these people who are anticipating the full and perfect work of Jesus, who is, as we know in John chapter 10, the Good Shepherd, who also is the great high priest, the high priest, who offers the sacrifice once for all for the forgiveness of sins. And so as we're reading through the Old Testament, and even as we're seeing depictions of it on screen or on stage, whatever it may be, we can have our minds attuned to not just understanding the story as it occurs just in Exodus, but what is anticipating later on in the person and work of Jesus. So Jethro, again, is somewhat mysterious, but he shares that with Melchizedek as two people who act in roles that anticipate the work of Jesus. One as shepherd priest, the other as prophet, priest, and king, in a way. As well as Moses, who, again, as we see, is a shepherd, and then who will shepherd not sheep, but the people of Israel. And I guarantee you, as we read through Exodus, there are moments where Moses would definitely prefer to be working with sheep than to be working with people. I can guarantee you that. Yeah, Rickard.
Do you know why in verse
18 of?
Exodus 2,
2, okay.
he's called, there's this guy Reuel, their father, the father of the 7 daughters?
He has
Then in
multiple
verse-
names.
Okay.
Yeah, it just says multiple names.
Okay.
I'll give you an example of why it's not surprising. So my best friend and best man at my wedding, his name's Alex, but you know what his first name is? Bradley. But he never goes by Bradley, he goes by Alex.
There's so much alike.
But not that I'm encouraging you to hack into my accounts, but it makes for a great security question for that, because a lot of hacks, just you're getting free practical cybersecurity advice, happen because of social engineering. That is to say, people know just enough about you to make good guesses to get into an account. So if you have a security question like, what's your high school nickname? They can comb through your social media, potentially, and figure that out. One of the questions is, what's your best friend's first name? And, they can maybe see it depending on the settings on your profile, but for him, he goes by Alex. Reality is his first name is Bradley. So that's a tricky little twist on that security question that makes it harder for me to be social engineered. So he just has multiple names. And again, that's not totally uncommon. Like I said, my best friend has gone by Alex his whole life, but his first name's actually Bradley. Another example would be J.R.R. Tolkien. J.R.R. is actually, his one first name and two middle names. John, I think it's John Ronald Reuel Delphin, but he goes by J.R.R.R. So that's why, he just has multiple names. Jethro's the one he is most known by, but that too is also his name. Good question, though. Anything else before we get to our last and final scene for today? An important one, and this will be a good one to end on.
Here I am. Take the sandals from your feet. For the place on which you stand is holy ground. Who are you? I am that I am. I don't understand. I am the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.